It was a bright morning in the city. The air outside was fresh, and the streets were already filled with people rushing to work, carrying coffee cups, or talking on their phones. Among the crowd walked a woman who carried herself with quiet confidence. Her name was Alicia Carter. She was the CEO of one of the fastest growing technology companies in the world. People who worked with her admired her brilliance, her calm decision-making, and her ability to lead even in the toughest situations. Yet, Alicia never showed off her power or wealth. She believed in moving with humility. To anyone watching her on the street that day, she looked like a professional woman on her way to an important appointment, not someone who led a company worth billions of dollars. Alicia had a specific purpose for her visit that morning. She was headed to a well-known bank downtown, one of the largest in the country. Her company had been working on a major partnership deal with the bank, a deal that was valued at more than $2 billion. The agreement was almost complete, and the only step left was finalizing certain documents. Normally, such tasks could have been done by her staff, but Alicia believed in leading by example. She wanted to personally step into the bank, hand over the documents, and ensure everything went smoothly. For her, even the smallest steps in a big journey deserved her attention. She walked through the glass doors of the bank and was greeted by the cool air of the lobby. The space was large, modern, and filled with polished marble floors that reflected the morning light. There were other customers waiting in line, ordinary people depositing checks, withdrawing cash, or asking questions about their accounts. Alicia took her place in line like everyone else. She did not ask for special treatment, nor did she reveal who she was. That was her nature. When it was her turn, she stepped forward and greeted the bank teller politely. The teller was a young man in his late 20s, with neatly combed hair and a sharp tie. But there was something in his eyes, a mix of impatience and arrogance. He glanced at Alicia, looked her up and down quickly, and then forced a half-smile that carried no warmth. "Yes," the teller asked flatly, as if he were already annoyed. Alicia kept her voice calm and friendly. "Good morning. I need to submit these documents related to a business account. Also, I'll need to verify my identification." The teller barely nodded. Instead of showing professional courtesy, he leaned back in his chair and asked unnecessary questions in a tone that carried doubt. "Do you even have an account with us? What kind of business are you with?" Alicia handed him her company papers along with her government-issued ID card. She had expected the process to be routine, quick, and simple. But as the teller picked up her ID, his lips curled into a smirk. He glanced at it for only a second, then let it slip from his hand. The card fell onto the floor with a sharp sound that echoed slightly in the quiet lobby. For a moment, time seemed to pause. Other customers waiting nearby turned their heads to see what had happened. Some frowned, realizing the teller's action was not an accident. It was deliberate. The way he released the ID, the expression on his face, it was all clear. Alicia looked down at her ID lying on the polished floor. She bent gracefully, picked it up without complaint, and held it in her hand. Her face remained calm, almost unreadable. Inside, however, she felt a familiar ache. It was not the first time she had experienced such treatment. Despite her success, despite her position, there were still people who judged her unfairly. The teller gave a short laugh under his breath and said, "You'll have to wait. These kinds of requests take time." His tone was dismissive, as if he were speaking to someone unimportant. But Alicia did not respond with anger. She did not raise her voice, nor did she demand immediate attention. She simply watched him, her steady eyes holding a quiet strength. There was something powerful about her silence, something that made even the nearby customers feel a shift in the air. One woman standing in line whispered to another, "She handled that with so much grace. I would have lost my patience." Alicia finished the small transaction without another word. The teller continued his rude behavior, speaking curtly and tapping his pen against the counter as though he was doing her a favor. When the interaction was complete, Alicia thanked him softly, turned around, and walked away. As she left the counter, her heels clicked gently against the marble floor. She walked past the other customers who were still watching, their expressions filled with both sympathy and admiration. They could sense there was something about her, something that set her apart, though they didn't know who she was. Stepping back into the sunlight outside, Alicia took a slow breath. She didn't allow anger to control her. Instead, she carried herself with dignity, reminding herself that patience often revealed more than immediate confrontation. She thought about the meeting scheduled later that day with the bank's executives, where the final contract for the $2 billion partnership would be presented. The irony did not escape her. The same bank that had just treated her with such disrespect was about to welcome her into their boardroom as a partner whose decision could shape their future. Alicia walked to her car, her ID held firmly in her hand. She opened the door, sat down, and closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered her journey, the nights she stayed awake building her company from scratch, the times she was told she would fail, and the moments she had to prove herself again and again. Every challenge had made her stronger. Every insult had taught her patience. And every test had reminded her that true power didn't need to be loud. She smiled faintly to herself. The teller had no idea who she was. He had no idea that the woman he tried to humiliate was the very person who would decide the fate of his bank's largest upcoming partnership. Alicia decided she would not say a word, not yet. She believed that some lessons in life were best taught not with anger, but with silence. With calm determination, she started her car and drove toward her office, preparing herself for the meeting ahead. The morning had been unpleasant, but it had also reminded her of something important. Dignity was not given by others, it was carried within. And so, without speaking a single harsh word, Alicia left behind an unforgettable impression not just on the teller, but on everyone who had witnessed the scene inside the bank lobby. When Alicia left the bank that morning, she carried her documents with the same calm strength she always showed. But inside her heart, there was a storm of thoughts. She had faced many situations like this before, moments when people doubted her, judged her unfairly, or dismissed her without knowing who she truly was. Even now, after years of building a global company and leading thousands of employees, she still found herself confronted with the same lack of respect. As her car moved slowly through the busy streets, she thought back to her early years. She remembered the small neighborhood where she grew up, where her parents worked hard to provide a simple but honest life for their children. She was taught from a young age that dignity was not about titles, money, or appearances, it was about how a person carried themselves no matter the situation. Her mother's words often echoed in her mind: the world may not always be fair, but you must always be fair to yourself. Never let anyone else decide your worth. These lessons had stayed with Alicia through her years at school, through her university studies, and through the countless nights she spent working to create her company. She knew the road to success was never smooth. She had faced investors who laughed at her ideas, partners who doubted her vision, and critics who said she would fail simply because she did not fit the picture of what a CEO was supposed to look like. But every single time, she had proven them wrong. That memory gave her strength now. She thought about the bank teller's smirk, the way he had let her ID card fall, and how he had spoken to her as if she were unworthy of his time. She could have shouted. She could have demanded to see his manager. She could have revealed her position and made him regret his behavior immediately. But Alicia believed that power did not need to be displayed loudly. Real strength could remain silent and still shake the ground. As the car stopped at a traffic light, Alicia glanced at the tall buildings that lined the avenue. Among them stood the very bank she had just left. She knew that later that day, she would walk into the boardroom of that same bank. This time, however, things would be very different. There would be no dismissive tone, no smirks, no carelessly dropped ID cards. Instead, there would be executives in expensive suits, eager smiles, and respectful handshakes. They would treat her with honor because they knew what her signature meant: a $2 billion partnership, one of the largest in the bank's history. The thought did not make her arrogant. Instead, it reminded her of the truth: respect should never depend on money or power. Everyone deserved to be treated with basic dignity, whether they were depositing a single dollar or signing a billion-dollar deal. When she reached her office, her assistant, a sharp and loyal young woman named Clara, greeted her at the entrance. "Good morning, Miss Carter. Are you ready for the bank meeting later today?" Alicia nodded. "Yes, Clara. Everything is in order. But let's take a moment to review the documents again." The two women sat in Alicia's spacious office, which was decorated not with luxury items but with meaningful symbols of her journey: photographs of her team, awards her company had won, and a framed picture of her parents smiling proudly at her graduation. Clara spread out the partnership papers on the table, going through each page carefully. As they worked, Clara noticed a certain heaviness in Alicia's eyes. "Is something bothering you?" she asked softly. Alicia hesitated for a moment, then told her what had happened at the bank earlier that morning. She described how the teller had treated her, how he had dropped her ID card, and how he had spoken with arrogance instead of respect. Clara's face turned red with anger. "That's outrageous. If they knew who you are, they would never have treated you like that." Alicia smiled faintly. "And that is exactly the problem, Clara. Respect should not be based on who a person is, but on the simple fact that they are a person. The teller didn't know me, but that shouldn't matter. I didn't need him to recognize my position. I only needed him to do his job with dignity." Clara nodded slowly, her anger calming into understanding. "So, what will you do about it?" Alicia folded the papers neatly and placed them back into the folder. "I'll do what I always do. I'll let my actions speak. Silence can be louder than any argument." The hours passed quickly, and soon it was time to head back to the bank for the signing ceremony. Alicia dressed in her usual elegant style: a simple dark suit, polished shoes, and a watch that was more practical than decorative. She didn't wear flashy jewelry or designer labels to impress anyone. Her presence alone carried weight. On the way, she thought about the significance of the partnership. This deal was not just about money. It was about expanding opportunities for her company, creating jobs, and supporting communities. The bank also stood to benefit enormously. For them, partnering with Alicia's firm would open doors to new markets and strengthen their reputation in the business world. Yet, as important as the numbers were, Alicia's mind returned to the teller's behavior. It was a reminder of something she had always believed: the culture of an organization is revealed not at the top but at the bottom. How a company's employees treat everyday people is the clearest reflection of its values. And what she had witnessed in that bank lobby was deeply troubling. By the time she arrived at the bank headquarters, Alicia's thoughts were clear. She walked into the towering building with her folder in hand, her expression calm but steady. The receptionist greeted her warmly this time, recognizing her name on the schedule. She was escorted up to the top floor, where the boardroom awaited. As she stepped into the room, she was met with a group of smiling executives in tailored suits. They stood quickly to greet her, their hands extended, their voices full of praise. "Miss Carter, welcome. We are honored to have you here. This partnership means so much to us." Alicia nodded politely, her face composed. She took her seat at the head of the table, laying her folder gently on the polished surface. Her eyes swept across the room, catching a glimpse of movement outside the glass wall. To her surprise, she saw the same teller who had insulted her earlier walking by with some papers in his hands. For a brief moment, their eyes met. His expression changed instantly from arrogance to shock. He froze, realizing who she truly was. Alicia did not look away. She held his gaze calmly for a few seconds, then turned her attention back to the executives. She did not need to say a word. Her silence spoke volumes. The meeting began, but Alicia already knew in her heart that the outcome would not be what the bank expected. The atmosphere in the boardroom was polished and professional. The long wooden table gleamed under the warm lights, and the walls were decorated with expensive art pieces meant to impress. Around the table sat some of the most powerful executives of the bank, men and women in fine suits, their faces glowing with anticipation. They had prepared for weeks for this moment, the signing of the $2 billion partnership with Alicia Carter, the CEO whose company was shaping the future of technology. The executives were full of smiles. Some whispered among themselves about the prestige this deal would bring, while others rehearsed polite compliments they planned to shower on Alicia. But Alicia sat quietly at the head of the table, her folder resting in front of her. She gave a polite nod to acknowledge their greetings, but her mind was far away from the glittering promises of profit. Her thoughts lingered on the incident in the lobby earlier that morning, the teller, his smirk, and the ID card on the floor. One of the senior executives, Mr. Daniels, leaned forward. He was the vice chairman of the bank, a man with a sharp voice and an even sharper focus on numbers. "Miss Carter," he began with a wide smile, "we are delighted to have you here. This partnership is more than just business, it is a milestone for both of us. Your company's innovation, combined with our financial power, will create history." Alicia responded with a polite smile. "I appreciate your words, Mr. Daniels." Her tone was calm, but her eyes remained steady. The executives launched into their presentation. Charts were projected on the screen, showing projected revenues, international opportunities, and all the benefits that the partnership would bring. They spoke of billions in returns, market expansions, and long-term collaboration. Every slide was designed to impress Alicia and assure her that this was the best decision for both parties. But Alicia listened in silence. She did not interrupt, nor did she seem moved by their numbers. She folded her hands gently on the table, her posture upright, her expression unreadable. After nearly half an hour of presentations, the executives finally paused, waiting eagerly for Alicia's response. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat and gestured toward the contract. "Miss Carter, everything is prepared. All we need is your signature, and this historic deal will be sealed." Alicia reached for the folder she had brought. Slowly, she opened it and placed her government-issued ID card on top of the papers. The executives exchanged puzzled glances. The ID card seemed out of place in the middle of such a high-profile meeting. She looked at the card for a moment, then lifted her eyes to meet theirs. Her voice was steady and clear. "Before we speak about contracts, I want to share something that happened this morning. When I came to this bank, I approached one of your employees at the teller's counter. Instead of being treated with basic courtesy, I was treated with suspicion. My identification card was deliberately dropped on the floor. I was spoken to in a tone that carried no respect." The room grew silent. The executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their smiles fading into stiff expressions. Mr. Daniels blinked, clearly unsettled. Alicia continued. "I did not reveal who I was. I did not ask for special treatment. I came as a customer, as any other person would. And what I experienced revealed something about the culture of this institution. Respect was missing." Her words were calm, not angry. But they carried a weight that filled the entire room. The executives exchanged nervous glances, realizing the seriousness of her statement. They knew that Alicia Carter was not only a powerful business leader but also someone whose principles guided her decisions. Just then, the glass door of the boardroom opened slightly. An assistant stepped in to place some files on a side desk. Behind her, in the hallway, the same teller from the lobby happened to pass by. His eyes fell on the boardroom table, and for a brief moment, he froze. He saw Alicia sitting at the head of the table, surrounded by the bank's top executives. His face turned pale. He quickly lowered his head and hurried away, but Alicia had already noticed his presence. She allowed a brief pause, letting the silence deepen. The executives looked increasingly uncomfortable. Some adjusted their ties, others tapped their pens nervously against the table. Finally, Alicia spoke again. I believe that the way a company treats its customers, every customer, not just the powerful ones, shows its true values. A contract worth $2 billion does not excuse disrespect toward a single individual. Culture is not built in boardrooms. It is shown in the simplest interactions, at the front desk, at the teller's counter, in how you treat people when no one is watching. Her words landed heavily. The executives had no defense. They knew she was right. All the charts, projections, and financial promises meant little in the face of this truth. Mr. Daniels tried to recover. He leaned forward with a nervous smile. Miss Carter, I assure you this is not who we are as a bank. Perhaps it was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Alicia raised her hand slightly, stopping him mid-sentence. Her eyes were firm, though her voice remained calm. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a choice. A small choice, perhaps, but small choices reveal character. And I do not align myself with institutions that lack the values I believe in. The silence in the room deepened again. The executives were stunned. The magnitude of what she was saying began to dawn on them. The partnership they had counted on, the deal they had already celebrated in their minds, was slipping away. Alicia gently closed her folder. She left the ID card resting on top, a silent reminder of the morning's incident. She looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each executive in turn. Her gaze was not harsh, but it carried a strength that made every person feel the weight of their responsibility. I am not here to seek apologies or excuses, she said finally. I am here to make decisions. And my decision must reflect not just business goals but also values. Today, your teller reminded me why respect matters more than profit. Her words hung in the air. No one dared to respond. For the first time in the meeting, the executives realized that Alicia Carter was not a woman who could be swayed by numbers or pressured by promises. She was a leader who measured success in principles, not just profits. The teller in the hallway had vanished, but the echo of his mistake lingered in the room like a shadow. And so, without raising her voice, without anger, Alicia had changed the course of the entire meeting. The silence in the boardroom stretched long after Alicia's words settled in the air. It was not the kind of silence that comes from confusion, but the heavy silence that follows truth. Every executive sitting at the table felt its weight pressing on them. The numbers on their charts no longer seemed impressive. The contract in front of them suddenly felt like a fragile sheet of paper instead of a historic agreement. Alicia sat calmly, her posture steady, her face composed. She had no need to repeat herself. She had spoken once, and that was enough. The executives, however, looked uneasy. Some avoided her gaze, staring instead at their notes. Others exchanged nervous glances, as if silently urging someone else to speak. Finally, Mr. Daniels, the vice chairman, cleared his throat. His voice was softer now, stripped of the earlier confidence. Miss Carter, I understand your concern. What happened in our lobby is unacceptable. But please, we ask that you consider the larger picture. This partnership is not only valuable for our bank, but it will also create opportunities for your company. One person's mistake should not overshadow what we can achieve together. Alicia listened patiently, but her expression did not change. She folded her hands on the table and spoke slowly. Mr. Daniels, this is not about one person's mistake. This is about what that mistake reveals. Respect is not an accessory you put on only in important meetings. It is a principle that must be shown at every level, in every interaction. If your employees cannot treat a stranger with dignity, then what does that say about your culture? How can I trust that culture to be a partner to my company? Her words were simple, but they struck deeper than any accusation. The room grew tense again. A few of the younger executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while the older ones frowned, realizing the gravity of what they were about to lose. Another executive, Miss Harding, attempted to soften the blow. "Miss Carter, we deeply respect you and your leadership. We are willing to issue an apology, both to you personally and to your company. We can provide additional commitments to show that this bank values fairness and professionalism." Alicia gave a small, calm smile, though it did not reach her eyes. An apology is just words. Words can be polished, but actions cannot be hidden. What I saw today was an action. And actions tell me more about your bank than any prepared statement ever could. Her gaze swept across the room, steady and unflinching. Each executive she looked at felt the message clearly: this was not a negotiation. This was her decision. Slowly, Alicia reached forward and touched the contract lying on the table. For a brief moment, the executives leaned forward eagerly, hoping she would sign. But instead, she pushed the papers gently back across the table, sliding them away from her. The motion was small, but its meaning was enormous. It was the decision everyone in the room feared. "I cannot move forward with this partnership," Alicia said firmly, though her voice was calm. "It would not be consistent with my values, nor with the culture I want my company to align with. Numbers may be important, but principles come first. Without them, the numbers mean nothing." The room froze. The executives stared at her in disbelief. The very deal they had been preparing for months, the one they had celebrated in private conversations, had just been undone in a matter of seconds. Not because of financial disagreements, not because of failed negotiations, but because of a single act of disrespect that revealed something larger. Mr. Daniels looked as though the ground had shifted beneath him. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His confident energy from earlier had vanished completely. Beside him, Miss Harding lowered her eyes, realizing that nothing they could say would change Alicia's mind. The silence was broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of the wall clock. The sound of the clock seemed louder now, as if marking each second of the bank's lost opportunity. Finally, Alicia stood. She picked up her ID card from the table and slipped it back into her folder. She gathered her documents with the same grace she had carried all morning. Her movements were slow, deliberate, and dignified. Before leaving, she looked around the table one last time. Her voice was calm, yet it carried an unshakable firmness. "I hope this moment teaches something important. Respect cannot be bought, and trust cannot be negotiated. They must be earned. I wish you success, but I will not be part of this journey." With that, she turned and walked toward the door. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor, each step echoing in the silence. The executives sat frozen, unable to stop her, unable even to rise from their seats. They watched as the boardroom door opened and closed behind her. The sound of the latch clicking shut felt final, like the end of a chapter they had hoped would be written differently. In the hallway, Alicia walked with steady grace. A few employees glanced at her as she passed, sensing her authority without knowing the details of what had just occurred inside the boardroom. Among them was the same teller from the morning, standing near the elevators with a stack of papers. When his eyes met hers, panic crossed his face. His earlier arrogance had vanished completely. He lowered his head quickly, unable to hold her gaze. Alicia did not stop. She did not scold him. She did not need to. Her silence was heavier than any lecture. Her calm walk past him was enough to show that she had risen above his disrespect, and that his actions had cost his entire institution far more than he could ever imagine. Outside, the sun was still shining brightly, as though untouched by the tension that had just unfolded inside. Alicia stepped into her car, closed the door, and exhaled slowly. She had made her decision, and she felt at peace with it. She knew there would be consequences, headlines, discussions, questions from other business leaders, but she also knew she had chosen the path of principle over profit. Back in the boardroom, the executives finally began to move. Mr. Daniels buried his face in his hands. Miss Harding whispered something under her breath about the deal being gone. Others muttered in disbelief, struggling to understand how such a small incident had caused such a massive loss. But deep inside, each of them knew Alicia was right. If a company could not ensure respect at the simplest level, how could it ever claim to hold integrity at the highest level? The teller's careless smirk that morning had cost them $2 billion. But more than money, it had cost them their reputation. The decision had been made. Alicia Carter left the bank's boardroom with calm confidence, her head held high, and her principles unshaken. To her, the matter was closed. But for the bank, the true weight of her decision was only beginning to settle in. Inside the boardroom, the executives sat in stunned silence for several minutes after she walked out. No one wanted to be the first to speak. They all knew that what had just happened was historic. An agreement worth $2 billion had slipped through their fingers. And it hadn't been lost because of complex negotiations or competing offers, but because of a single careless act in the lobby earlier that morning. When the executives finally began to talk, their voices were low and full of tension. Mr. Daniels pressed his hand to his forehead and muttered, "Do you realize what we've just lost? This deal could have transformed our position in the market." His words carried both anger and regret. Another board member shook his head. It wasn't the numbers that made her walk away. It was us. Or rather, it was the values we failed to uphold. One employee treated her without respect, and that revealed more than all our presentations combined. Miss Harding sighed heavily. She was right. Respect is not shown in boardrooms, it is shown in everyday interactions. And we failed. The room fell into silence again. They all knew the truth, but accepting it was painful. Meanwhile, Alicia returned to her company headquarters. As she stepped into her office, her assistant Clara was waiting anxiously. "How did it go?" Clara asked, her eyes searching Alicia's face for clues. Alicia placed her folder on the desk and gave a small, calm smile. "The deal will not move forward." Clara blinked in surprise. "You mean, you turned it down?" "Yes," Alicia replied softly. "Because their values did not match ours. A partnership must be built on trust and respect, not just on money. Without those things, it isn't truly a partnership at all." Clara nodded slowly, her admiration for her boss growing even stronger. "You always remind me that principles matter more than profit. Today, you proved it again." Alicia leaned back in her chair, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a decision made with integrity. She knew some people would question her choice. They might call it too harsh or too costly. But she also knew that true leadership was not about pleasing everyone, it was about standing firm when it mattered most. The following days brought whispers and headlines. News of the failed partnership spread quickly through the business world. Analysts speculated about what had gone wrong, reporters wrote about the collapse of a historic deal, and insiders whispered about Alicia Carter's bold decision. Though the bank tried to keep details quiet, stories began to circulate about the incident with the teller. Clients, employees, and other executives started to piece together the truth. For the bank, the damage was severe. Investors grew uneasy. Customers questioned whether the institution truly cared about people or only about money. Competing banks saw the opportunity and began to court Alicia's company, eager to offer partnerships built not only on financial terms but also on values. For Alicia, the future opened new doors. Within weeks, another bank, one with a strong reputation for fairness and community service, reached out to her. Their executives did not just speak about profits, they spoke about shared values, long-term vision, and respect. Alicia listened carefully, and for the first time since the incident, she felt a sense of alignment. Soon after, she signed a new deal that was just as valuable as the first, if not more. Her employees celebrated, not just because of the numbers but because of what the decision represented. They were proud to work for a leader who refused to compromise her principles. They saw that their CEO was not guided by fear of loss but by the belief that dignity mattered above all else. One afternoon, as Alicia was leaving her office, a group of employees gathered to thank her. A young intern spoke up, his voice filled with emotion. "Miss Carter, I've read about what happened with the bank. I just want to say thank you. You showed all of us that it doesn't matter how successful you are, you should never accept disrespect. It gives me hope to see that values can still win in business." Alicia smiled warmly and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Remember this lesson," she said. "Money can come and go, but your integrity stays with you for life. Protect it. Value it. Because at the end of the day, it defines who you are." The intern nodded, his eyes shining with inspiration. As weeks turned into months, the story of Alicia Carter's decision became an example told in business schools, leadership seminars, and corporate offices. It was not a story about money lost, but about values upheld. People spoke of her courage to walk away from billions in order to stay true to her principles. Many admired her for showing that silence, dignity, and conviction could speak louder than any outburst or negotiation. Meanwhile, the bank that had lost the deal faced difficult times. Some of its clients quietly moved their accounts elsewhere, concerned about the company's culture. Employees began demanding better training on values and customer respect. The teller at the center of the incident no longer carried the same arrogance he once had. He realized, perhaps too late, that his careless action had cost the institution more than he could ever repay. Alicia never spoke badly about the bank. She never told the full story to the media, nor did she publicly humiliate the teller. She believed that silence could be more powerful than words. Instead, she let her actions speak for her. She moved forward with grace, building her company stronger than ever and proving that success founded on principles could withstand any challenge. On a quiet evening months later, Alicia sat in her office looking out at the city lights. The skyline glowed with energy, and she thought about how far she had come. She remembered the small neighborhood where her journey began, the nights she spent working tirelessly, and the countless moments when she had to prove her worth. She also remembered the incident in the bank lobby, the smirk, the ID card on the floor, and how that small moment had revealed a greater truth. She smiled faintly to herself. The world often measured success in dollars and contracts, but Alicia measured it differently. To her, true success was the ability to walk away from anything that did not honor her values. That, she believed, was worth more than any number written on a contract. And so, her story became not just a lesson in business, but a lesson in life. Dignity is priceless, respect is non-negotiable, and silence can sometimes be the loudest answer of all.